While millions of people are screaming at their TVs, painting their faces, and letting their entire mood collapse because 11 strangers lost a game, there's a massive group of people doing something very different. They're not angry. They're not excited. They're not emotionally invested at all. And according to neuroscience, that's not a coincidence. Their brains might actually be wired differently. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you see sports obsession, and possibly explain something you've always felt but never had words for. Let's get this out of the way first. Not caring about sports does not make you boring. It doesn't mean you lack passion. And it definitely doesn't mean something is wrong with you. But there is something fascinating happening in your brain that's very different from the roughly 60% of people who follow sports religiously. So let's start with the obvious question. Why do so many people care so much? Humans are tribal creatures. For thousands of years, belonging to a group wasn't optional. It was survival. Your tribe protected you, fed you, kept you alive. Sports are basically modern tribes with better logos and overpriced merchandise. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same chemical involved in attachment, trust, and family connection, which means something kind of wild is happening. Their brain is temporarily treating these athletes who don't know they exist as part of their inner circle, as us. And here's where things start to split. People who don't obsess over sports often have what psychologists call lower tribal instinct activation. Their sense of identity isn't tightly wrapped around belonging to a group. They're more individualistic, more self-contained. They're more likely to think, I don't need to belong to something bigger to feel complete. And this isn't just theory. A 2019 study found that people with low sports interest showed significantly less us versus them thinking. Translation? They don't automatically dislike someone just because they support a different team. But it gets stranger. Because what happens in the brain of a sports fanatic during a game is, neurologically speaking, intense. You know that feeling right before opening a present? That tight anticipation in your chest? That's dopamine. Sports fans get that same hit constantly during games. Every play, every possession, every near miss. Tiny bursts of anticipation followed by reward. Over and over. Studies using brain scans show that watching your team activates the same reward centers as gambling. The same circuits involved in highly addictive behaviors. And here's the key detail. It's not winning that makes it addictive. It's uncertainty. You don't know if your team will win. That unpredictability keeps dopamine flowing. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement. The most addictive reward schedule known to the human brain. The same principle slot machines use. Your brain doesn't really care where dopamine comes from. It just wants more. And people who don't care about sports, their dopamine systems simply don't respond to vicarious competition. And that difference might not even be a choice. Because research suggests some of it could be genetic. And that's where things get really interesting. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can predict how much someone enjoys competitive spectator activities. In other words, your complete indifference to whether a team wins or loses might literally be written into your DNA. But dopamine isn't the only thing at play here. There's another psychological layer that explains why sports fans and non-fans often feel like they're speaking different languages. Sports fans experience something psychologists call basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won." When the team loses, it's, "They lost." Notice the shift. That pronoun switch is doing a lot of emotional work. It allows people to absorb external victories into their own sense of identity. Wins feel personal. Losses can be pushed slightly away. People who don't obsess over sports are far less likely to engage in this. Their self-concept stays more consistent. They don't need external wins to feel successful. Their self-esteem isn't tied to outcomes they can't control. And before this turns into a comment section war, let's be clear. This isn't about one being better than the other. It's about difference. Because here's something that sounds contradictory. Sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They practice caring deeply about other people's struggles, even if those people are strangers wearing matching jerseys. So why don't non-sports people feel that same emotional pull toward athletes? It comes down to empathy allocation. Everyone has a limited capacity for caring deeply. You can't emotionally invest in everything, so the brain makes choices. People who don't care about sports often direct that emotional energy elsewhere, toward close relationships, toward creative work. toward ideas, causes, art, and meaning that feels personal rather than symbolic. A 2021 study found that people with low sports interests scored significantly higher in openness to experience and appreciation of art and beauty. Their emotional highs don't come from competition. They come from understanding, from insight, from connection that doesn't require a scoreboard. Their brains are seeking the same things sports fans are seeking: meaning, belonging, transcendence. They're just finding it somewhere quieter. And for some people, there's another layer beneath all of this. Not caring about sports can be a defense mechanism. Maybe they were bullied in gym class. Maybe they felt excluded by sports culture. Maybe they associate sports fandom with aggression, dominance, or pressure they never signed up for. Or maybe they just find it boring, and that's allowed too. Your indifference doesn't need a tragic backstory to be valid. But here's the part that explains why sports fans and non-sports people often talk past each other. They experience meaning differently. Sports fans find meaning in narrative. The underdog, the comeback, the rivalry, the dynasty. It's compelling because it's unpredictable. Real drama. Real stakes. People who don't care about sports often look at that randomness and feel nothing. They think, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I can't influence, performed by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't affect my actual life? They're not wrong. But neither are sports fans. They're just playing different games. What researchers describe here is something called parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional relationships with teams and players. They care deeply, but the relationship doesn't go both ways. People who don't care about sports tend to prefer something different. They invest emotional energy where there's reciprocity, where their presence matters, where their actions influence the outcome. They don't want to watch life happen. They want to participate in it. This is why the question, "Did you see the game?" often feels strange to them, not annoying, just irrelevant. Because for them, meaning isn't something you consume. It's something you create. Psychologists who study optimal experience often talk about flow states. Those moments when you're so absorbed in something that time disappears, your sense of self fades, and you feel fully alive. For some people, flow happens while watching sports. For others, it happens while writing, building, learning, creating, thinking, while having a deep conversation, while working on something that feels personally significant. Same brain chemistry, different doorway. And here's what's quietly fascinating. People who don't obsess over sports often report feeling more present in their own lives. They're not spending hours every week emotionally writing someone else's highs and lows. They're engaged in their own. That doesn't make them detached. It makes them grounded. There's something subtly radical about that in a culture built around spectatorship, where most experiences are consumed through screens, where passion is outsourced, where meaning is borrowed. Choosing not to emotionally invest in sports isn't rejection. It's selectivity. It's saying, I want my emotional energy to go where it actually changes something. And that choice shapes how you see the world. You notice details others miss. You think longer before reacting. You're less swept up in collective emotion. Not because you don't feel deeply, but because you feel deliberately. This is why sports fandom can feel overwhelming from the outside. The intensity, the emotional swings. The way entire moods hinge on outcomes completely out of personal control. For someone wired like you, that doesn't feel exciting. It feels unstable. You'd rather place meaning somewhere solid. Something you can touch, something you can shape. And over time, that creates a different relationship with life. Less dramatic. More intentional. You don't need manufactured highs. You're comfortable with quieter satisfaction. And that difference often gets misunderstood. People assume indifference equals emptiness. That if you're not emotionally loud, you must not care. But the truth is usually the opposite. You care deeply, just not loudly. And in the final part, we're going to tie all of this together. Why this way of being isn't missing something essential. Why it might actually come with its own kind of advantage. And why the next time someone asks you about the game, your lack of interest says more about self-knowledge than disconnection. So what does all of this actually mean? It means that if you don't care about sports, you're not missing out on some essential human experience. You're not disconnected. You're not emotionally flat. You're just different. Your brain's reward system works differently. Your tribal instincts are calibrated differently. Your empathy isn't weaker. It's directed somewhere else. And that's perfectly okay. The next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" And you genuinely have no reaction. Remember this. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game. One that doesn't depend on chance. One that doesn't outsource meaning. One where your attention goes to things that actually shape your life. And there's something quietly powerful about that. Because while others are emotionally invested in outcomes they can't control, you're investing in your own experience. Your own growth, your own understanding. You're not watching the story, you're living it. That doesn't make you superior. It makes you intentional. It means you choose where your energy goes. What deserves your care? What earns your attention? In a world designed to pull you into constant spectatorship, that choice is rare. And here's the part most people never realize. The same traits that make you indifferent to sports often show up elsewhere. In how you think, in how you process information, in how you handle noise, emotion, and complexity. You're less reactive, more reflective, less tribal, more individual. You don't automatically join the crowd, you observe it. You don't get swept up easily. You step back first. And that changes everything. Because once you stop outsourcing excitement, you start noticing what actually matters to you. Your own interests, your own values, your own sense of meaning. That's why your life might look quieter from the outside. But from the inside, it feels stable, grounded, deliberate. So no, you're not missing out. You're opting into something else. And in the next video, we're going to explore why people like you often process information completely differently from the crowd, why you notice patterns others overlook, why you think slower but deeper, and why that difference might be your biggest, quietest advantage. If this resonated, you already know what's next. The next video will make even more sense now.